Max Lewin, born in Poland, Łódź, the second largest city. It was the second largest industrial city in Europe, next to Manchester, England. And I had a good life. I was only 12 when the war broke out, and I loved my upbringing. I was a good student in school, and I loved sport, and I loved to watch Joe Louis winning with Max Schmeling, if you know. I loved to watch Esther Williams being one of the best swimmers in the world, a lady. I watched John Weissmuller, and I watched also Charlie Chaplin. The reason I'm mentioning all this is to show you that I had a good life, and I loved my parents for giving me a good life. And that was the motive for me to survive. I was taken away from my parents, even though I ran away from my concentration camp in 1941. I ran away, took my life in my own hand to be with my parents because I heard that the ghetto of Białobrzegi is going to be evacuated. I came running at night, but my mother, for some reason or another, with my little sister, started to cry that I should go back to the camp. And I listened to my mother. It's just like she would see in it, that the next few days they took the whole ghetto of Białobrzegi, liquidated, and I was in that camp. I came back, and the SS was watching us, that we were not allowed to go out from the barracks because we were building, at that place, we were building a new railroad station for the troops, for the SS, where they were trained over there. As a matter of fact, they had over there a whole division of Iranian volunteers that come to be trained as SS men. You don't hear about that the Iranians were a large nation that volunteers to cooperate with the Germans. And my motive to survive was my love for my family, for my parents, my little sister, and my good life that I had in Poland and Łódź. All the movies that I loved, all the books that I had, and all the good student that I was in school. Actually, the first DP camp was in Neustadt, Schleswig-Holstein, northern Germany, close to the Baltic Sea. From there, I went to Bergen-Belsen. From Bergen-Belsen, I went to Feldafing. The reason I did go from one camp to the other, I was trying to find relatives. I was trying to find my family. I thought maybe somebody is alive. So I was traveling for months from one end Germany to the other. And I was trying to find people that knew my parents, but nobody knew of anything. The final outcome was that my parents and my little sister was executed in Treblinka. That was in 1942. If you were dreaming about a piece of bread or a little soup, and how I survived, I was sick. I got sick with a typhoid in a camp, Skarzysko, where we were building the ammunition. It was an ammunition factory for the Germans. Skarzysko Kamienne, the name was HASAK, Schneider Aktionsgesellschaft. And we were building over there grenades and all kind of ammunition for the German to go against Russia. And in 1944, they liquidated because the Russian army start to march from Stalingrad down to Poland to Warsaw. On Warsaw they stopped, and that's when they liquidated our camp, and they took us to Sulejow, where I started to build ditches, anti-panzer ditches against the Russian army. But the Germans covered up the ditches with grass, so the planes wouldn't see where the ditches were. And the tanks fell into the ditch. But little tanks fell in, and the Russian army found out, and they started to go around the ditches that we were building. This was in 1944 till 1945. They took me to southern Germany territory where they were building the V1 and V2. This is the unmanned missiles, Dr. Brown's missiles. In April the 2nd, 1945, the Allies planes, international, Canadian, European planes and US planes were blacked up the sky, and they started to bombard with intention to ruin all the machinery that if the Germans would be capable to roll into the mountains where we were building the factory. The factory was just built empty, and it would take only a few more days to roll in the machinery, the V1 and the V2, if the Germans would succeed to start manufacturing this on the transmission. The world would be today different. Luckily, that the Allies found out that the machinery was covered on the Harzgebirge mountain, on the southern part of Germany. On the foot of the mountain, the machinery for miles was covered with grass, so the Allies wouldn't see it. But the espionage of the Allies found out, and they bombarded into the granite mountains, which they managed to destroy all the machinery for the V1 and V2. And they took us, the SS wanted to cover themselves. They didn't want to go to fight the Russians, so they decided they'll take us for a death march. And that was April the 2nd till May the 2nd. A whole month. We started in the thousands of us, but we were left about a few hundred only, because we were dying out and they were killing us out on the months of that march. I finally got liberated in May the 2nd, 1945, close to Hagenau, Germany, northern part, close to the Baltic Sea. From there, from Hagenau, after we got liberated, the American troops took us to Lübeck, northern Germany by the Baltic Sea. In Lübeck, from Lübeck, I started to have the idea that I have to go and look for my relatives, so my father and my little sister. And I started to go from one end of Germany to the other, south and north, west and east, and I couldn't find nobody. Finally, I settled in Frankfurt, Germany, and I was working for the American troops in a GI missile. And now to tell you a little bit more about myself. I told you about Joe Louis, Max Schmeling. I also knew who Jackie Sherky was. Do you know who Jackie Sherky was? Oh, he was fighting with Max Speyer. He lost to Max Speyer. You know who Max Speyer was? And Max Speyer was the first one to win from Joe Louis. And then later Joe Louis knocked him out. as the same Joe Louis knocked McSmailing out. And my beautiful life that my parents provided for me, I wish I could provide a beautiful life for my grandchildren, and that's what brought me over here too.